Here's another problem from Chapter 9. This is from the back of the chapter, problem 9.14, a little bit more complicated than what we've been doing. Let's go through it. Computech Corporation is expanding rapidly and currently needs to retain all of its earnings, hence it does not pay any dividends. However, investors expect Computech to begin paying dividends, beginning with a dividend of 50 cents, coming 3 years from today. The dividend should grow rapidly at a rate of 35% per year during years 4 and 5, but after year 5, growth should be constant 7% per year. If the required return on Computech is 13%, what is the value of the stock today? Okay, so when we deal with these problems, first of all, we need to understand what is it asking. So we need to figure out what the stock value is today. So first thing we want to do is we want to draw a timeline. So let's do just that. Okay, it's going to look something like this. And we have 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then 6th year. And we could stop after that, even though we know stocks go forever. At the start of the the end of the 5th year, start of the 6th year, growth is going to be constant. So we're going to label that constant 7%. So growth is 7%. Sorry, this is a G. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we know growth is constant at this point. This company is not going to pay dividends until 3 years from today. So 1, 2, 3 years, this is our first dividend of 50 cents. All right, nothing here. But after that, so there's no growth here because there's no dividends to grow. But between 3 and 4, we're going to have growth of 35%. So we'll do that. Growth equals 35%. Growth equals 35%. All right, required return is 13%. So we'll just let ourselves know that, hey, we're going to discount by 13%. Okay, hopefully that's readable. Sorry, it's really hard to draw with the mouse. So the first thing we need to do after we draw a timeline is we need to forecast dividends. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to type the math out because it's going to be hard for me to do that. So we know the dividend, first dividend that we receive is 50 cents. We need to figure out what's the dividend going to be at year 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the dividend we get at year 3. So that's 50%. We know that it's going to grow by 1 plus our growth rate, right? And that growth rate, I'll put it in parentheses so we can stay clean. That growth rate is 35%, right? To go from here to here, the dividend's going to grow by 35%. All right, so let me just clean this up a little bit. 50 cents times 1 plus 0.35 is 1.35. And that tells us that our dividend, 50 times 1.35, 0.5 times 1.35. So our dividend at year 4 is going to be 67.5 cents. So I'll just put the half cent in there. Okay, so that's dividend at 4. All right, so let's write that. So 0.675. Then what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the next dividend. So we leave this value in our calculator, 0.675, and we're going to multiply it by 1 plus the next growth rate, which also happens to be 35%. So we're going to multiply it by 1.35. And that should give us a value of 0.9113. So 91 cents roughly. Okay, so let's do that, 9113. And we may adjust these numbers at the end, but for now, we'll just leave it to the 4th decimal place. So our last dividend is going to grow by 7%. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the previous dividend, multiply it by 1 plus the next growth rate, this time at 7%, so 1.07 equals. And our last dividend is going to be 0.975, so 97.5 cents. All right, so let's put that in our timeline. Now I mentioned this in class, but the only reason that we need this dividend here is to figure out the price of the stock at this point in time. All right, we can't figure out the price of the stock using the discounted dividend model because we're in a non-constant growth state from years 0 to 5. But after 5, we're in a constant growth state, so we can then apply the discounted dividend model. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this just to clean it up. So our next step is to figure out the price at year 5. And here's how we're going to do that. So P5 is how I'm going to label it. So price at 5 equals, and here's our constant, our discounted dividend model, constant growth model. And that's going to be the dividend at 6, right? If we want to know the price, we always have to go ahead one dividend. So it's the dividend at year 6 divided by the difference of the required return minus our growth rate, constant growth rate. Okay, so we already calculated our dividend at 6, so let's go ahead and plug that in, 0.975. We know our required return that was given to us, so that's 13%, so 0.13. And then our constant growth rate is 0.07. 0.07. All right, from there we're just going to simplify and solve. So 0.13 minus 0.07, that's going to come out to 0.06. So 97.5 cent dividend divided by 0.06. Well, that's going to give us a price of $16.25. Okay, so remember, this is the price that we could sell the stock for at year 5. All right, this is the expected price. All right, so what we could do now is we can add this to the dividend that we're expected to get at year 5. So we could take this and we could just add it below right here, $16.25. So $16.25. Or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add these together real quick and clean it up. 0.9113. All right, so let's erase this real quick. So I'm just adding these numbers together. That's all I'm doing. All right. And we should end up with $17.16. Okay, another thing I'm going to do is I know that this dividend right here is reflected in the price that we solved for. So we're not going to include that when we value the cash flows because that's already reflected in the price that's reflected in these cash flows. Okay, so remember that. Don't worry about that. The only reason we needed the dividend was to figure out what the price is at 5. Okay, so let's clean things up a little bit. I like to stay organized. So these are our values that we're expected to get before the stock gets to a constant growth state. So what we could do now is we can manually convert these to present values, right? So the 50 cents is going to be discounted 1, 2, 3 times. The 67.5 cent dividend is going to be discounted 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And then this cash flow right here, which is the year 5 dividend plus the price we could sell the stock for, that's discounted 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Or what I think is an easier way is to set up your cash flow. So we can use our cash flow register, hit that CF button on your calculator, and then we just plug in the values. So CF0, so the value below 0 is 0. There's no value there. We got to make sure that the frequency is set to 1. So as you go down, make sure that the frequency of each of these cash flows is set to 1. And you'll realize that once you plug in cash flow 1. If you go down, make sure the frequency is 1. Cash flow 2 is also 0. Cash flow 3, C03, is going to be 0.50. Cash flow 4 is going to be 0.675. And finally, cash flow 5, we're going to program that as $17.16. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So there's our cash flows right there. All right, so again, I'm going to walk you through the steps as I type them into my calculator. Press the cash flow button. Clear out your work. So second, clear work. You should be at cash flow 0. So hit 0, enter, down, 0, cash flow 1. Frequency 1 is 1. Hit the down button again, get to cash flow 2, which is 0. Make sure the frequency of that cash flow is set to 1. Cash flow 3, 0.5. Frequency of that is 1. Cash flow 4 is 0.675. Frequency of that is 1. And our last cash flow is $17.16. $17.16. So once we program those cash flows, then what we're going to do is we're going to press the NPV button. So we press the NPV button, the calculator is going to ask us for an interest rate. So we want to plug in our interest rate, which is the required return here. So what we're discounting by. So 13, enter. Press the down button one more time and then tell the calculator to compute by pressing the CPT button. And you should get something like $10.07. And that is our answer. $10.07 is what the value of the stock is worth today. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.